Hey everybody, Backpack Hack here coming at you with another trail tip. And when it comes to choosing a fuel to use in a stove for camping and backpacking, you've got a lot of choices. And I've got 8 choices right here on the table that I'm going to compare. It can be confusing because you don't know which one's going to be the best for you. Well, that's what this video is going to be about, is to help you make a decision on what the best stove fuel is. I'm going to be comparing these 8 fuels on 3 metrics. How long does it take to boil 2 cups of water? How much fuel in weight does it take? And how much money does that fuel cost to boil those 2 cups of water? Now, I'd love to do this when I'm out camping and being outdoors, but the problem is because it's going to take so long to record this video, I need to be able to control the environment, both so I don't have someone or something interrupt me during the process of taking this video, and second off, because I'm doing this in my house, I can control the environment. I don't have to worry about the temperature rising or falling. I don't have to worry about wind coming up or dropping off and affecting the results. That's why I'm doing this inside. Some fuels, you have options as to the size and quantity of the items that you purchase. For instance, Isopro fuel, there are 3 different sizes. I don't happen to have a medium-sized one, but there are small, medium, and large canisters. You can get 1-pound propane tanks. You can get larger tanks. You can run a stove off of a 5 or a 10 or a 20 or even larger propane tank with the correct adapter. Same thing with propane fuel. You can buy those individually, and you can buy them in packs of 48. Chafing fuel, however, I don't think you can buy one at a time. I think you generally have to buy a dozen minimum. Same thing with heat. You can buy 1, you can buy 2, you can buy 4. There's a lot of choices. So I tried to make my choices of fuel in terms of purchase kind of middle of the road. Not the great big massive quantities and not little one-ofs if possible. Also, when comparing the prices of these, I'm not including sales tax and I'm not including any shipping if I had to order it. Because where you are and where the fuel is, if you're having it shipped, may affect the shipping charges, and the sales tax rate is going to be different from place to place. So those 2 things are not considered when it comes to the money of the cost of the fuel. This test is going to be comparing these 8 fuels, from common to rather unusual and maybe some that you've never even heard of being used as fuel. From left to right, I have propane, Isopro, I call it Isopro, really it's isobutylene or something like that, but I call it Isopro, very common. Solid fuel tablets, in this case Esbits. Chafing fuel, denatured alcohol, or sometimes called marine stove fuel. Butane fuel, HEET, sometimes called dry gas, and Everclear 151 proof. Now, some of these fuels have stoves specifically designed for that fuel. This Snow Peak Gigapower, for instance, is designed specifically for these Isopro canisters. Solid fuel tablets have stoves designed specifically for them. Liquid fuels, such as the denatured alcohol, the HEET, and the Everclear, can use a simple spirit burner. And there are stoves designed specifically for propane and butane as well. I can already hear some people saying, hey, you can't boil water with chafing fuel. It doesn't get hot enough. Let me tell you, I'm not trying to take a great big huge chafing dish and boil gallons of water. This is a 2-cup test. So I'm here to tell you right now, yes, you can boil water with chafing fuel. There is no stove that's specifically designed for it. It's generally something you see at a buffet or a catered event, which is just to help keep food warm. But you can boil water with chafing fuel. A problem that you might think arises from trying to compare these different fuels is the specific stoves. There are a lot of variety of stoves, many times for a single fuel. In other words, you can get this Snow Peak Gigapower, you can get an MSR, Pocket Rocket, you can get a Jetboil, you can get all sorts of different stoves, sizes as well. You can get different sizes of Esbit stoves. There's a lot of different spirit burners out there. So how do I compare these when there's such a wide variety of stoves? Some stoves are cheap, some stoves are expensive. Some stoves are very inefficient, and some stoves are very stingy when it comes to burning these fuels. So how do I compare all these fuels with a wide variety of stoves? Simple, I use one stove. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, there's one stove that's going to burn all these fuels? Yes, there is. It's called the Firebox G2, and I'll put a link in the description below to where you can pick one of these up. This stove, with the right adapters and the accessories, can burn all of these fuels plus more. It can burn wood, it can burn charcoal and other fuels like that. But I'm not going to get into things like wood because different woods, oak, maple, ash, those type of woods burn differently. So the wood I would be using would be different from the wood you do. Plus, is it seasoned the same? What about the moisture content? These variables make it impossible to compare them to something that's standardized and man-made, so it's equal across the board. So I'm not going to be doing anything other than these fuels right here. These are the 4 pieces I had to purchase in addition to the stove in order to be able to burn these 8 fuels. I have a Trangia burner that directly attaches to these Isopro canisters, and to adapt these to the propane and the butane, I have an adapter for the propane and an adapter for the butane. And in order to use the liquid fuels, the Everclear, the HEET, and the denatured alcohol, I'm going to be using a spirit burner. So with all this, I'm able to burn all these 8 fuels without resorting to a special stove like these. And in order to make this test as fair and equitable as possible, I'm going to do all the boils in this 2.5 cup stainless steel cup with a lid. And I'm not going to just measure the water in a measuring cup. I'm going to weigh the cup and the water, which is sitting here, has been sitting here on my table since yesterday, so it's acclimated to the temperature, so all the tests will be the same temperature. I'm not drawing water out of the tap. And I'm going to use this baster to make sure that every boil has exactly the same amount of water in it by weight. And I just want to point out right now, there is not going to be a single fuel that is the lightest, the cheapest, and the fastest. There will be one that is the lightest. There will be another that is the cheapest, and there will be another that is the fastest. But there is not going to be one that ticks all 3 boxes. So now that we've got all the preliminaries out of the way, let's light things on fire. First on the test, Isopro. The beginning weight of the canister is 202 grams, and after 5 minutes and 35 seconds, the canister was down to 189 grams. Next up, propane. The beginning weight was 734 grams. After 5 minutes and 18 seconds, the canister weighed 720. Next in the lineup is butane. Starting out at 357 grams, in 6 minutes and 52 seconds, the canister weighed 346 grams. Moving on to the liquid fuels, marine stove fuel, or denatured alcohol, starts out at 137 grams, and after 8 minutes and 24 seconds, was down to 109 grams. Heat, or dry gas, is next. A beginning weight of 133 grams, it took 8 minutes and 18 seconds to bring the weight of the canister down to 105 grams. And while not a common fuel, it is possible to use 151 proof Everclear. Starting out at 152 grams, in 12 minutes and 24 seconds, it was down to 130 grams. Another uncommon option is chafing fuel. The beginning weight of the canister was 138 grams, and it took 19 minutes and 30 seconds to bring the weight down to 122 grams. And finally, the only solid fuel in the lineup, Esbit tablets. With the disc, it started out at 33 grams, and in 9.5 minutes was down to 21 grams. Now that I've boiled 16 cups of water, it's time to take a look at the results. If weight is your primary concern, butane is the way to go. Only 11 grams to boil 2 cups of water. Followed closely by Esbit at 12, the Isopro at 13, Propane at 14, and Chafing at 16. The Everclear took 22 grams, denatured alcohol took 28, and the HEET as well took 28. If time is of importance to you, propane is the way to go at 5:18. Isopro was a little bit longer at 5:35. Butane took almost 7 minutes. HEET and denatured alcohol took within the 8-minute range, 9.5 minutes for the Esbit. The Everclear took almost 12.5 minutes, and far and away the longest burn time, it took to boil 2 cups of water was the chafing fuel at 19.5. If money is important to you, again, butane is the choice at only 10 cents per boil. Denatured alcohol took 12.7, propane took 13.7, and HEET took 14.3. All the way up to Everclear, which as far as away is the most expensive, at almost 69 cents per boil. So now that we have the statistics out of the way, let's talk about some of the pros and cons of the various fuels. The canister fuels, such as the butane, the Isopro, and the propane, all have the advantage of most stoves have a valve that you can adjust the flame. The other fuels generally do not. They're really made more for boiling water. These fuels, however, can be used for cooking, which means you can simmer or put something on low heat to keep it warm, something you can't do with these other fuels. They burn, and they burn at full tilt. A disadvantage to canister fuels is that generally their canisters are made out of steel, so if moisture gets on them for a long time, they could rust and compromise the integrity of the container and leak the fuel out. Specifically with Isopro, you have 3 available sizes. Unfortunately, I don't have the middle size. This one's 110. They make one that's twice as big as at 220, and this one's 450. So you have a variety of sizes available to you. It's just I don't use the middle size, which is generally 210 or 220 grams. If you're going to base or car camp, I would suggest the larger ones because you don't have to worry about carrying them. These are not really conducive to hiking in the backcountry, where something like this is. And one advantage that these smaller canisters have is they will fit inside most boil pots right along with your stove, so you can reduce the bulk in your pack. One disadvantage of the Isopro is these are non-refillable containers. You can't put more gas in them anywhere. So once you're done with them, ideally what you should be doing is using a tool to puncture them and then recycling the steel. The other disadvantage is the cost. These are rather expensive, as we saw by the comparison of cost. If cold weather performance is important to you, then propane is the way to go because it has a minus 42 degrees Celsius boiling point, which means this will give you a good flame even below freezing, whereas Isopro and butane will begin to struggle as the temperature drops. However, this container is rather large and not conducive to backpacking, so this is better suited for base or car camping. Since butane has a lower pressure than the Isopro or propane, this is a great option for all-around cooking and heating. Even though butane doesn't burn as hot as Isopro and propane, we saw by the comparison that it is actually far more efficient in terms of heat output. However, just as the disadvantage to the Isopro and the propane, it is non-refillable. So once you're done with them, you're done with them. Another thing I want to point out is this notch in this collar. That is very important if you're going to be using this type of canister outside of a dedicated stove. If you have a cassette stove, you will notice that this actually sets in the stove only one way. If it's turned this way or turned this way, it will not work. There is a mechanism that accepts this little notch. And the reason for that is if you try to use it in this orientation, or this orientation, or even a new canister in this orientation, you're going to be dumping liquid fuel right into your stove, and you're going to have a hell of a problem. So it's very important that you set it down on a side with this notch up. An advantage to denatured alcohol is you can find it in stores other than sporting goods stores. You can find it in hardware stores, home improvement centers, paint stores, specialty paint stores, as well as your big box stores are generally going to carry this in their paint department. So it's a very easy to source fuel. HEET also has that advantage. If you can find this in gas stations and truck stops and convenience stores where they're not going to have some of these specialty fuels. Liquid fuels also have a general ability to have a consistent flame regardless of the air temperature. Once you get it burning, it's going to burn the same temperature whether it's 10 degrees or 20 below or whatever. They're generally going to be a very consistent flame. HEET has the advantage of having basically its own container. However, I would not go backpacking with either one of these. However, if I were to go backpacking with a liquid fuel, I would get something like this. I can put as much fuel in this container as I want. So if I only need 4 ounces, I simply fill it to here, and I don't have to carry more fuel than is necessary. Something that these fuels, the canister fuels, can't do. You have to start out with a full one. You can't start out with a half of one unless you've already burnt half, and unless you want to get into weighing these and keeping track of how much the fuel is in them. You can do that, but this is a whole lot easier. If I'm just going to go back into the backcountry for an overnight or 2-night loop camp trip, I'm going to take liquid fuel, because that way I can take exactly the amount of fuel that I need. I included Everclear 151 proof because in an SHTF situation, many of these more common fuels are going to be emptied out of the shelves rather quickly. However, denatured alcohol, the HEET, and Everclear are going to be fuel possibilities that a lot of people are going to overlook. So that's why I included it. So if you need to source a stove fuel and your common fuels are gone, this type of fuel may be available to you. Because how many people are going into a liquor store or a grocery store or gas station and looking for fuel? Not very many. And as I stated at the beginning of the video, yes, you can boil water with sterno. It's low and slow, but it can be done. Just like these, it may be more readily available as a cooking and fuel source. When a lot of people are looking for things like this might be readily available where this is all gone in an emergency. So don't overlook chafing fuel. Since this has such a low and slow flame, even though you can't control it, this might be better suited for actual cooking, simmering, and just putting a pot on the stove to keep the food warm for a short while. This might be the way to go. And finally, the solid fuel, in this case the 14-gram Esbit tablets. It shares a feature that is common with the chafing fuel. If you picked up on it, I was able to blow these two out. With the rest of them, I either had to turn the valve off, or with the liquids, I had to use the cap and drop it onto the spirit burner to get the flame to go out. These two, you simply blow out. This solid fuel has been around for almost a century. It burns really hot. It isn't that efficient. However, there are some downsides. We saw the cost was a little high, and it's very messy and stinky when you use it. Both before you use it and as you use it, it has a very poor odor about it. But the biggest problem with this solid fuel is it leaves a sticky, hard to clean residue on both the stove and the bottom of your pot. And there are two fuels that have the distinct advantage of being able to crush the containers once the fuel is consumed. If you carry the HEET in its original container, as well as the solid fuel tablets, both containers can be crushed to reduce volume once the fuel is consumed. One thing I want to point out about the videos that I did with the burn test is you'll notice I started the timer as soon as I could after I ignited the fuels. Liquid fuels, for instance, in a spirit burner, take a while to get the stove to an actual operating condition. I started the timer at the beginning of the ignition, not once the stove got to optimal use. I figured this is the way most people are going to use them in the field, and so that's the way I used them in these trial tests. And again, I want to reiterate what I said early into this video. There is not going to be one single winner. And I know I've thrown a lot of information at you, but hopefully it's helped you decide which fuel is best for your adventure. And don't just pick one. One may be great for an overnight trip. Another one may be better for the long haul through a thru hike. So don't just limit yourself to one type of fuel. Hopefully I've helped you a little bit. This is Backpack Hack coming at you with this trail tip. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment on my videos. Be safe out there, and I'll see you out on the trail.